since you did. Last month was my birthday and you missed it. You didn't call me. Neither did your brother. You guys both ignored me for my birthday.
That isn't true. I sent you a text.
True. No, you did not.
Bullshit.
That was last year.
Bullshit.
I got nothing. You sent me one last year.
Did I send you one last year? Am I a shitty son? Oh, man. Yeah. It was last year. Wow.
I want everybody to know that Thor did not say anything to his father for his birthday a month ago.
If it makes you feel any better, I didn't text you anything after that last happy birthday, so it's still the same one.
All right, guys, here we go again. More pirate software news. Now, ironically, the last couple weeks after I made that last video that did so well, I have been too busy with work and my personal life to even cover this entire pirate software saga. And to be honest, being a little more disconnected from all the news, I kind of thought this entire thing would have wrapped up by now. So I sit down at my computer this weekend and I start looking at Twitter and seeing everything that's going on. And I cannot believe that this is still going. And now some of the details that are coming out, it's a lot to cover. So we're going to do a quick recap and then cover some of the more nefarious details, some of the more seedy stuff, which I don't really enjoy going through. But it's there, so we're going to talk about it. All right, so to do a quick recap, Pirate Software recently was suggested by one of his viewers to essentially put out an apology video to try to garner some sympathy or some goodwill, some grace back from his audience, to which he basically told them exactly what you'd imagine he would.
Put up a video saying you were wrong with every situation and the internet move on. I am not doing that. I don't give a fuck. Yeah, simply bend the knee and lie about how you feel and everyone will stop bullying you. That's a great idea, dude. Yeah, no, eat shit.
Then, of course, we had the whole hype train phenomenon where he essentially was caught collaborating with one of his mods to use a dummy account to generate fake hype on Twitch. And, of course, a lot of people have been wondering if this is something that actually violates TOS. Maybe it's even criminal. Legal Mindset even commented on this himself. Now, Thor Jason here thinks that it's not in any way a violation of TOS or illegal.
That's been a public thing forever. I think I even talked about it on there. That's against TOS, though? No, it is not against TOS. It is absolutely not against TOS to have somebody use their own money to buy subs and bits for the channel if they want to. That in no way was triggered by me, nor was he compensated for that or reimbursed for it. That is not against TOS. So it's a shit joke at this point. Just because you heard it on YouTube doesn't mean it is. Yeah. In fact, I guarantee that you could go to thousands and thousands of communities across this entire platform and find lots of different moderators supporting the stream. Do you know why? Because moderators are generally the first fans of the stream. That is how that works in every community on this platform.
But again, at the very least, I said on Twitter, in regards to what Pirate Software says here, he isn't wrong that mods often are the biggest supporters of content creators. However, he's full of shit if he thinks it's not deceptive that his mod used a dummy account to try and generate artificial hype, which I think is really the crux of the issue for a lot of people, given the fact that it seems that he's trying to, create the impression or the illusion that he's more popular than he really is, especially given how many subscribers he's lost recently. So, of course, we have more comments from people like Mr. Obvious here on Twitter, saying it looks like Pirate Software engaged in bit farming or scamming to boost his Steam numbers, as well as what looks like shady business practices or money laundering. I can't say whether or not that's either one of those things. Of course, whether it's illegal or a terms of service violation, that's going to be up to the proper authorities. I can't even begin to tell you. What I can tell you is that due to a lot of this negative controversy, a lot of the negative attention that Pirate Software has garnered, he is now accusing people like Quinn Theo, who's been covering a lot of this Pirate Software drama, of actually encouraging doxing in his Discord. And of course, I'll put some of those up on the screen for you guys to look at for yourself. Again, I am never going to be the one that's going to encourage people to dox anyone. I don't support it. I would hate to be doxed myself, so I don't think it's ever justifiable. Whether or not something qualifies as doxing, though, that remains up to the person and how, doxing is interpreted by both the law and the individual. That being said, I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of subscriber loss still going on with Pirate Software. You can see on YouTube in just the last 30 days, he's already lost 230,000 subscribers. And I believe over on Twitch, it's somewhere around 54,000 in the last couple of weeks. Absolutely staggering numbers that I'll never see in my lifetime. It's absolutely nuts. And of course, a lot of this goes back to the review bombing of Heartbound. And of course, you can see day after day, week after week, it's not getting any better for this game. And of course, this is a game that I have personally played. And I'm going to be honest right now. I know that a lot of people bought this game, played it for like 10 minutes, and then left a negative review and refunded it. I had no intention of doing that. I wanted to play the game and give it an honest chance. I made it 1 hour in, and I realized it was some sort of weird therapy session for Thor, and it wasn't actually designed to be a fun, enjoyable game. And I refunded the game, and I just walked away. Now, I did not leave a negative review, so again, I did not buy the game to review bomb it. I simply wanted to see what it was for myself, and I hated it. I was not going to subject myself to 3 hours of that game. That being said, the review bombing is not going away. And of course, a lot of people pointing out that this was a game that up until a few months ago wasn't even getting regular updates. Obsessed with Games on Twitter says, a new Steam update shows when an early access game doesn't receive any updates for a while. In this example, it's Heartbound. While the dev streams for up to 18 hours most days, the game collects dust instead of receiving the promised monthly updates. And this was a tweet from February of this year. And of course, recently you've seen this, and you see this article from February saying Steam now warns you if an early access game hasn't been updated in a while. Now Heartbound is getting updates, I think like once every 4 or 5 weeks. So it seems that he's making somewhat of an attempt. But you can see from Expert Armchair here, it says, reminder that this face of indie dev promised a return to monthly update videos on his channel, RE Heartbound, starting from January. He has not done a single one in the almost half a year since. At this point, his brand is like if Kickstarter and Reddit had a baby. And of course, again, it's a lot more fun to stream and have, hype trains and everything else going on than to actually work on the product that you started 8 years ago that you're trying to sell people. Now, going to the character of the person, it's really interesting because now a lot of these tweets that we're seeing are from people who have actually had time working with Thor, with Jason. From Mina Silverkin on Twitter, whenever I scream about how I had to work with Pirate Software and he doesn't know shit about F, I mean, I was directly ordered to deal with him for Diablo 3 testing in QA. I saw his PC screens. Since he sat in front of me, I had to assign, review, and redo his tasks. She goes on to say, no one would discipline Jason for doing 0 assigned work just because messing with an executive's son would impact their career. Just like how he was rehired because of Joey Ray, it doesn't mean his dad ever did or would do anything directly. Jason doesn't even understand nepotism. I'm also friends with his dad through random acts of cosplay and mutual friends. I know for a fact his dad isn't like that at all, wouldn't abuse position or status for Jason, and Joey Ray sure as hell doesn't deserve how he was treated and talked about by Jason over the years. Stop stealing valor from those of us who actually did the effing work, Jason. Last I checked, you never obtained full axe and perforce access on D3. I did. You were so up your own ass that you never realized who you were working with. I was one of 3 QA with full dev access for D3. How many Blizz game jams did you even participate in? 0. Such a developer. You rage screamed across the building at our team the entire time we played League during a charity event for CHOC. Did you forget, such a god gamer? Didn't you cancer bait on Facebook for sympathy? And I do not recall anything about this. This person, Clarity Valentine, says, let him effing have it, Mina. Absolutely deserved. Mina responds, I'm going to post more in depth about all this, but it's a start. Dude barely understands the surface level of software development and anything else, and has been talking out his ass forever. All of us who work in the industry know it. Another person, Wrangling Knave, says every story coming out of people who worked with him has a pattern of essentially stolen valor. When I first heard him tell his stories in IS Short, I had this gut reaction where I just know he's just regurgitating stories from former colleagues reframed as his own. Mina says, I wish I knew more about what happened after he moved to the Hacks team, but I can tell you that we had exploit discovery on our core team that then got handed over to Hacks for focused regression confirmation. His, quote, security work is social engineering, phishing attempts at best. What gets even more interesting is it's no longer just people who work with him, and again, you can confirm this person worked at Blizzard from 2011 to 2016, so almost 5 years in QA. But now we're seeing new claims of really bad behavior by Jason. Now, I'm going to start off by saying this is all alleged, okay? We're talking posts on Kiwi farms and old allegations that we've talked about on previous videos. So take this all with a grain of salt. But this is worth covering because this is now coming back to the forefront. So from Kiwi Farms, it says Pirate Software is accused of unwanted conduct of that nature. And of course, it goes on to say here on this thread, X, an anonymous person's experience with Thor. This was during the COVID or just post-COVID era. We had met on a furry dating app called Howler. At the time, I had just wanted to know another furry game dev friend. I had no idea who he was, what game he made, or how big he was on the internet. I do not follow streamers or content creators. He had told me at the time he was going through depression from a divorce. I do not know if this was true, but this is what he was telling me. I wanted to lend him an ear and invited him over. It was strictly on a platonic basis, talking about game dev and light cuddling at most. First awkward sign was that he was unwilling to wear shoes outside. Despite me asking him to, he just told me he doesn't wear shoes outside. Led to him tracking dirt and mud in my car at home, and this is just kind of a weird thing in my personal opinion. I'm like, dude, put on a pair of shoes. Afterwards, he continued talking to me about his divorce and life problems, and then spent a few hours ranting to me about Diablo builds and how big he was as a streamer. I wasn't particularly interested, but again, as a young furry game dev recently moved to Seattle, I wanted a similar friend. When we started hanging out in my room is where things got weird. Despite me explicitly telling him I did not want anything penetrative or any fluids on my bed, he kept insisting on doing things. Eventually, it got to the point where I was pushing him away, telling him to stop, but he seemed to pretend to not hear, and with him being larger than me, it wasn't exactly easy to push him off. So he continued to dry hump me until he finished. After it was all done, I lectured him, saying that I had told him repeatedly not to do that. Luckily, I'm pretty thick-skinned when it comes to casual stuff, but if I were anyone else, that would have been a traumatic experience. His reply was simply, "You know you liked it," to which I rolled my eyes in disgust. At that point, I pretty much said, "I'm taking you home," and even as I was taking him home, he begged me to take him to the grocery store to pick some things up. Frustrated, I reluctantly did so and just figured this would be the last time I ever interact with him. Afterwards, neither of us messaged each other on Telegram anymore, and he deleted his Telegram. I pretty much blocked it all out of my mind. I wasn't particularly hurt. I just thought, wow, that was surreal. I can't believe someone like that exists. For authenticity's sake, I can also tell you I confided in many other indie game devs in Seattle this story, and they believed me and have always known Thor to be kind of shady. I had no intention of coming out with this story and didn't care for the attention, but it did weigh on my conscience because I do believe Thor should not be allowed to abuse anyone else further. I had zero idea that he was a big entity on the internet until some Game Awards show showed him. This is when I sort of realized maybe I should confront Thor. We're in similar game dev circles. I see his name everywhere. And beyond that, I did not want to see further harm done to someone else. Now we get into some of the screenshots from their conversation that he actually deleted a few of, but you'll see up to the point where they had the conversation and the messages back and forth weren't deleted yet. So you see right here where it says Pirate Software, one mutual server shared between them. She messaged him and says, "Hey, we need to talk when you have the chance." Thor says, "About, this seems very ominous." They responded, "Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but our last interactions left me feeling really uncomfortable, to put it lightly. I wanted to talk to you about it if you remember me before making any judgments." Thor says, "Yep, I remember. Sorry if I made you uncomfortable." X says, "If there's a reason we never talked again after that, I guess I just want to know how much you remember. I didn't want to bring up something 2 years later just to be spiteful or anything, so I apologize if I come off that way. To be real, I kind of didn't want to think about it much, but it's somewhat hard not to see you around my circles nowadays. We can talk as you have time, there's no rush, but at the very least knowing you were sorry is a better thought than none." Thor says, "I cut contact once you made it clear things were negative between us. I think it was communicated poorly from my side at the time, but I didn't feel like I had a better way to do so. Legitimately felt it would just be a blip of something you no longer cared about." X responds, "I was going through a lot at the time. Infection I told you about when we were meeting ended up being an undiagnosed chronic condition, so in a way I didn't really have a lot of mental energy to deal with it. As much as it would have been nice to genuinely feel like you were empathizing with my boundaries, it's hard to blame you for assuming I wouldn't want to talk. That said, as long as you understand why I was upset about things, that would go a long way to making me feel closure on the subject. I don't want to bother you beyond that, especially if things could be amicable between us." Thor says, "I totally understand I overstepped at the time and misunderstood the situation." This is where you get down to here where she's actually trying to press him for details. And I say she because I don't know if this is a man or a woman. I believe it's a woman, allegedly, but we'll see. Thor responds at one point saying, "This is starting to feel a bit like entrapment. Is there something you would like to discuss outside of trying to get me to say specific phrases?" X responds and says, "When I say I'm genuinely trying to give you my opinion on how it should have been handled, I'm being sincere. In that it would not be good if you felt like this was an acceptable thing to do to someone else in the future, or at least knowing that you cared enough to think about how that would have felt to me." Thor says, "I'm not sure what you're asking for in this interaction. It feels like you're demanding me to say things." Again, trying to keep himself from admitting to anything that could possibly be, I guess, legally actionable or whatnot. Who knows? X says, "I am just trying to give you, I'm giving you exactly how I felt about that situation, and I'm hoping you'd understand why I'd feel that way. I'm not sure why that would be wrong. I'm not trying to coerce a specific statement out of you, just give you my genuine advice for the future. That line you had said was inappropriate for me to me after what had happened, and something you could have said instead. And from this point on, there's no messages from Thor. They're basically all deleted. But essentially, the recap down here on the post says, a recollection of Thor's Discourse messages after 11/16. He basically deflected and said that he was hurt emotionally and figured I wanted nothing to do with him. So the crazy thing about this is not the first time we're hearing about this. And of course, people have already found this and commented online saying, when I found out that Pirate Software, who I just thought had bad takes on game preservation and was annoying, turns out to be a sex pest, and again, this is alleged, who dry humps without consent and tells you you can't complain because you secretly must have liked it. Yeah, very strange indeed. But we saw, previously this year, these things get rehashed from this person, Lyric, making these claims, saying when I was 20 years old, Jason Thor Hall, age 31 at the time, emotionally abused and manipulated me. And this person, Lyric, has all this stuff on this website talking about it. Again, this goes back into he said, she said territory, but this just seems to be a weird pattern. Again, he had allegations going back to February of this year, talking about exploiting a 16 or 17-year-old who he had hired to do commissioned work on a furry game that he was working on. And again, this whole crossover of Thor with the allegations, with the whole furry thing and all this other nonsense, it's getting to be very disturbing. It's like, I understand that anybody can make claims, and I believe that everybody should be subject to due process. And of course, just saying something doesn't make it so. But unfortunately, where there's smoke, there's fire a lot of the times. And it just seems that Thor, there's a lot of smoke. There's an awful lot of smoke. And at some point, one of these things is probably going to be true. And this goes beyond a guy with a bad take about stop killing games or being bad at coding, having a bad game that he's never going to finish, huffing his own farts too much. This gets to the point where now you're talking about potentially legal action being taken by people over horrible behavior. And if any of it's true, this just makes the entire situation that much worse. But I'm going to wrap this up, guys. Let me know what you think about all this down in the comments down below, and I will catch you guys on the next one. All right, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for being here. I do have two channels, Minimal Effort Podcast, as well as my gaming channel. I do have a Twitch and Kick for my gaming channel. We do live streams over there occasionally, maybe once a week. And then if you are in the market for a new PC, make sure to check out Meta PCs. Click the link I have down below. Use code TBO at checkout for a special discount. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.